Okay guys, just a few tips about the rack position. Okay? Again, we want the wrist as straight as possible. So I've really got the handle of the kettlebell on a diagonal through my palm so that it's resting on the heel of my hand or on the pisiform bone. It goes from the web of my thumb on a diagonal to the pisiform bone, so I'm able to keep my wrist straight. I have my elbow tucked in so that my forearm assumes a vertical position towards the floor, which is going to help me be in a more advantageous position when I press. My thumb is towards my sternum. I don't want my palm facing out so that the kettlebell ends up on my bicep. I don't want my palm facing in so that I'm having to use my bicep to hold the bell. I want the kettlebell close to my sternum. This also allows me to hold two kettlebells at the same time. However, I would warn you that when you start to work with two kettlebells, get these fingers out of the way, because it's really no fun to have your fingers slammed between the handles of two kettlebells. So get those three fingers out of the way there. Kettlebell ends up part on the forearm, part on the bicep. Hips are forward to help you rest your elbow on your hip, same way you would if you were holding a baby on your hip. We cover double kettlebell work in the level 2, but we cover even more double kettlebell work in our level 3 training, which is specific to Giravoy sport competition. Okay? And again, one of the main things is to get those fingers out of the way when you're cleaning two kettlebells to the rack position. Another thing about the rack. It's not that just we want the wrist to be straight for the sake of having the wrist straight. Obviously, having the wrist extended puts more strain on the wrist flexors, okay? As well as possibly causing a dorsal impingement at the wrist extensor tendons. However, this also adds another axis, which means that when I press overhead, this other axis encourages my arm to rotate. Whereas if I'm straight through the handle, there's less likelihood of me rotating, and I have a better lockout fixated position overhead. Not here, which now makes my wrist an axis for rotation of my whole shoulder, but here, straight, so that there's less likelihood of my shoulder rotating, putting the kettlebell over my head. So even though that's an overhead movement, the overhead movement starts with an acceptable, efficient rack position. If the rack is off, overhead is going to be off. But if the rack is right, then the fixation overhead is going to be easier. The other thing to appreciate about this rack position is that it is made easier by an appropriately manufactured bell. Having more space between the handle and the bell, the way the KBC bells are designed by kettlebell lifters for kettlebell lifters, gives you a more comfortable rack position. Additionally, the more rounded surface of the KettleBell Concepts brand bell stops this hard line or flat area from digging into the back of your forearm. So look for a bell that fits comfortably on your forearm, allowing you to maintain this straight position of the wrist.